There are moments in history that the world will never forget, and then there are others, just as real, just as haunting, that no one ever speaks of. During the First World War, countless mysteries unfolded beneath the thunder of artillery and the fog of battle. From unexplained deaths and anonymous photographs to ships that sailed into open waters and never returned, these are the forgotten enigmas buried deep within the war. In this video, we'll explore the secrets left behind in the shadow of World War I. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. And remember, you just might find incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Who truly fired the first shot? There's a question that has echoed across more than a century. Who truly fired the first shot on behalf of the British Empire? History often points to July 29, 1914, when a round was fired from the Austro-Hungarian warship Bodrog along the Danube River, marking the beginning of a chain of events that would draw all of Europe into war. But for the British Empire, the timeline and the identity of the person who pulled the trigger remains vague and disputed. On August 22, 1914, Sergeant E. Thomas, a cavalry drummer, pulled the trigger on 4 German horsemen. No one was injured, but that shot is considered the first fired by Britain on European soil. However, in another account, a different answer emerges. Just 10 days earlier, in the territory of Togoland in West Africa, a native soldier named Alhaji Grunshi, serving in the British Army, opened fire on a German unit guarding a wireless transmission station. It wasn't in Europe, but in essence, it was still a shot fired in the name of the British Crown. Other stories point to yet another date, August 5, 1914, just one day after Britain officially declared war on Germany. That day, a coastal artillery unit at Port Phillip, south of Melbourne, was ordered to fire a warning shot at the German freighter SS Pfalz, which was attempting to leave the harbor. The shot caused no damage, but it was enough to force the ship to turn back, making it the first enemy vessel captured in the world during that war. So then, who really fired the first shot for the British Empire? Who really killed the Red Baron? In an era when airplanes were still made of fabric wings and wooden frames, every aerial encounter was a fight to the death. Manfred von Richthofen, better known by his legendary title, the Red Baron, became an immortal icon of the skies. Throughout World War I, he was a legendary fighter pilot who brought down as many as 80 enemy aircraft, earning fear and respect across the European front. On April 21, 1918, as the war entered one of its most brutal phases, the Red Baron led his squadron into an air battle over the skies of France, engaging with Canadian and British pilots. In a fateful moment, he chose to pursue a young Canadian lieutenant, Wilfrid May, a pilot with no combat experience. That chase caught the attention of Canadian squadron leader Captain Arthur Roy Brown, who immediately turned his plane around to come to his comrade's aid. But in his relentless pursuit, the Red Baron made a fatal mistake. He flew too deep into enemy territory, an area where he wasn't just facing aircraft fire, but was now also within range of Australian infantry forces positioned on the ground. Under fire from both the sky and the earth, his signature Crimson plane became a glaring target. A single bullet, fired from an unknown position, tore into his chest, shattering his heart and lungs. Though mortally wounded, he managed to keep control of his aircraft, guiding it down to a field near the village of Sailly-le-Sec. By the time Australian troops reached him, he had taken his final breath. No one knew for certain who had fired the fatal shot. For more than a century since, numerous theories have emerged, from Captain Arthur Brown, who was officially credited in military records, to Australian gunners firing from below, but none of them have ever yielded a definitive answer. Even Brown himself, despite receiving formal recognition, later admitted he wasn't sure he had struck the Red Baron. Some historians point to another name, Australian Sergeant Cedric Popkin, as the man whose firing position best matched the angle of the wound. But to this day, no conclusive evidence has ever been found. The ghost crew of the Zebrina. In October of 1917, as the chill of early autumn swept across the English Channel and the war dragged on across both shores of the strait, a small vessel named Zebrina set sail from the port of Falmouth, Cornwall. Its destination was Sambrieuc, a short, 30-hour voyage carrying a load of coal and a nameless group of sailors. But Zebrina never reached the port it was meant to. 2 days later, French forces discovered the ship aground at Roselle Point, south of the port of Cherbourg. Strangely, there was no one on board. The hull showed no signs of damage, ruling out any immediate evidence of an attack. Even the lifeboat was still in its place. In the galley, the cooking fire continued to smolder. On the dining table, dinner was neatly set for 5, but not a soul was anywhere to be found. For more than a century, historians, sailors, and enthusiasts of the paranormal have tried to unravel what happened aboard the Zebrina that day. Some speculate that an unexpected storm caused the entire crew to fall overboard while attempting to secure the cargo. But with no visible damage to the vessel and the lifeboat still intact, that theory was soon dismissed. Another hypothesis suggests the crew may have been taken by a German submarine. At the time, the war at sea was intensifying, and German U-boats were heavily active throughout the channel. Allied vessels had reported submarine encounters in the same area where Zebrina had vanished. If the Zebrina had indeed come across one of them, perhaps its crew had been captured or silenced to preserve a secret. But there is another theory, rarely mentioned. According to records uncovered after the war, the Zebrina that day wasn't carrying 5 men, but 23. A strange number for a ship of its size. This detail raised suspicions that Zebrina was more than just a merchant vessel. It may have been a Q ship, a British decoy ship used to lure German submarines to the surface, where they could then be ambushed. If this were true, the Zebrina might have been exposed, and those on board may have never had a chance to resist. Whether the truth lies in a tragic accident, a wartime deception, or something that defies all rational explanation, the story of the Zebrina remains a mystery that has never been solved. Béla Kiss, the killer in the shadows and a disappearance without a trace. He lived in a small village called Cincota, near Budapest, a quiet man, polite in manner, and a well-known tinsmith in the area. The locals knew him as Béla Kiss, a name that drew little attention amid the hundreds of men who had gone off to fight in World War I. But what they didn't know was that not even war could bury the horrors he left behind. In 1914, when Kiss left home to enlist, he locked his house and departed without raising suspicion. But by 1916, rumors began to circulate that he had been killed on the battlefield. The landlord, assuming the property was now abandoned, decided to clean it out in preparation to lease it again. And it was there, within those walls, that a horrific secret began to surface. Inside the home, they found 7 large metal drums, sealed tightly like fuel containers. But when one of them was opened, the stench that rose wasn't of gasoline. It was the unmistakable scent of death. Inside was the strangled body of a woman, preserved in industrial alcohol. When the Budapest police arrived and searched the entire house, they discovered a total of 24 bodies, all stored inside similar barrels. Every one of them was a woman. But what was even more chilling, Béla Kiss was still alive. By the time the authorities uncovered his identity, Kiss was recovering at a military hospital after being wounded at the front. But before the police could reach him, he had switched his identification with that of a dead soldier and vanished into the night. In the years that followed, reports of his sightings emerged from all across the world, from Hungary to France, and even as far as New York City. Some claim to have seen him working as a janitor in an office building. When American police arrived to investigate, he had already disappeared again. No one knows how long Béla Kiss lived after that. No one knows if he continued to kill. And perhaps the most terrifying possibility of all is that he may have died a peaceful death somewhere, hidden among the very world he once filled with unspeakable horror. USS Cyclops, the colossal ship and a voyage that never returned. It was a behemoth, stretching over 500 feet in length. Its dark hull, like a floating block of steel, drifted through the Atlantic, carrying the might of the United States Navy during the final years of World War I. Its name was USS Cyclops, a coal transport ship by classification, but with superior design and heavy armament, it resembled more a mobile fortress than a mere cargo vessel. And yet, It was this seemingly invincible ship that would become the center of one of the greatest maritime mysteries in American history. On February 15, 1918, the USS Cyclops departed from the port of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, loaded with hundreds of tons of manganese ore. A total of 309 people were aboard that day, including both crew and passengers. The intended destination was Baltimore, but the captain made an unscheduled stop in Barbados, citing engine trouble. A few days later, the Cyclops departed Barbados and then vanished. For months afterward, the United States Navy conducted an unprecedented search effort, but it yielded nothing, not a trace. Questions began to mount. Was the ship overloaded beyond its safe carrying capacity? Did the engines fail and explode under the strain of the heavy cargo? Or had a sudden storm swallowed the vessel whole? Some began to whisper about the Bermuda Triangle, that infamous stretch of ocean said to have devoured countless ships and planes. Others speculated that the Cyclops was targeted by German spies and sunk in a covert operation never disclosed. And some ventured further still, into the unknown, speaking of extraterrestrials or deep-sea creatures not yet understood by man. Whatever the cause, the conclusion remained the same. 309 souls set sail aboard the largest naval vessel in America's fleet at the time, and not a single one of them ever returned. John Parr, the first to die and the last lie told. His name was John Parr. He was just 14 years old when he first walked into the recruitment office in 1912. Thin, undersized, and boyish, he lied about his age, insisting he was 18, old enough to wear the khaki uniform of the British Empire. 2 years later, John Parr became one of the first soldiers deployed to the Belgian front, where the forests and fields around Mons were about to become the British Army's opening battlefield of the First World War. He brought with him nothing but a rifle, a military bicycle, and the naive belief that this was how a boy became a man. On August 21, 1914, during a reconnaissance mission, he pedaled north of Mons to scout for signs of the approaching German forces. He never returned. Some said John was ambushed by a German unit. Others claimed he was shot while retreating, but no official records mention any skirmish in that area at that time. And there was no confirmation from the German side of any engagement either. Some researchers later suggested a more tragic possibility, that John may have died under friendly fire, misidentified as the enemy in the confusion of war. That perhaps, in the chaos of those early days, a single moment of mistaken identity was all it took to make John Parr the first British soldier to fall in the Great War. He was buried without ceremony in a simple grave overgrown with grass near Mons, and in one of history's cruelest ironies, directly across from John's grave lies the final resting place of George Edwin Ellison, the last British soldier to die before the war ended in 1918. John's mother wrote letters, many of them, pleading with the Army for a clearer explanation. But she never received a satisfying answer. And for the rest of her life, she lived with only one certainty. Her son had died for a reason no one was willing to tell her. You may not believe every detail of the stories you've just heard. To you, perhaps war is something best left in the past, something that shouldn't be unearthed once it's been buried. But if any part of this made you pause, even for a moment, then share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. We'll see you in the next video.